I did get a little finger in the shot close up for a bit of it. I'm not kidding. I'm sorry.
Which one?
It was like the very last part when you were flipping over and looking at the bottom. I'm so sorry.
Hey everyone. We are in my apartment kitchen in our modified Genius shooting setup. Our cameras, our phones, the cameraman, the entire crew really is my husband, Mike. And we're trying to shoot this while the baby naps. And this week I have the perfect recipe for this time. It is a pizza recipe from King Arthur Flour that happens to be their recipe of the year for 2020. And it combines all these different types of pizzas that we love in a recipe that is incredibly simple, even if you don't ever bake bread or pizza, and it only has 5 ingredients. The thing about this recipe is that it takes almost no active time, but it does take some passive time. The first thing that you need to do is make this dough. It's just these 5 ingredients: flour, salt, yeast, water, and olive oil. And I'm gonna weigh my flour because I like to do that, but you can measure in cups if you like. So at first, everything just goes in together. I lost my yeast. Okay, salt, yeast. This is active dry, but you can use instant, which is really handy. It's the exact same amount. So whatever kind of yeast you have on hand. And then some warm water. And a little bit of olive oil. More olive oil will come into play later. You could mix this with your hand, or with a spatula or spoon, or in a stand mixer. But it really happens so quickly, I don't think you even need to get the stand mixer involved. You're just stirring it together until it looks like a shaggy dough. Okay, there is our cute, shaggy ball of dough. We are not going to be kneading, it's a no-knead dough, but it has a technique that gives a little bit more structure to the dough called folding. If you have folded a t-shirt, as I know you have, you can do this. The cool thing about that is not only does that mean that even if you've never made a single bread or pizza recipe, you can do this, but it also is so satisfying to see. You do 4 of these folds 5 minutes apart, and each time you see the dough get looser and more relaxed and more hydrated and turn from this shaggy dough ball into what looks like pizza dough that you could buy at the supermarket. So it needs to just be covered in between so it doesn't dry out. 5 minutes on the timer. Oh. Okay, time for our first fold. So it's still looking pretty dry and shaggy here. You'll see that's gonna change a lot. I just dunked my finger in some water because that's gonna help the dough not stick to my finger. And this is literally all you're doing. Gathering underneath and then pressing it into the middle and then turning the bowl 90 degrees. So you just do that 4 times, fold your little package and then cover it up and wait 5 minutes and do it again. I know that where some of you are, there might be some flour or yeast shortages. A lot of people have run to the stores and bought up all the baking supplies. I'm really sorry about that. Have patience. There's nothing wrong with the supply chains. There will be flour and yeast and sugar and all the things we want to bake with at some point. Bookmark this recipe for then. I hope this is useful to anyone who does have flour and yeast on hand, and the fact that you can use whatever yeast you have. Any flour that has gluten will probably work. I wouldn't use a gluten-free flour for that. Find a gluten-free recipe. But like bread flour or all-purpose or variations on that theme, I wouldn't use self-rising either because that already has leavener in it. But anyway, your basic flours, your basic yeasts will work here. This recipe was sent to me by Posey Bryan, who used to work at Food 52 and now is the content editor at King Arthur Flour, and she wanted to tell me about their recipe of the year for 2020, which is this pizza. What that means is that all of their bakers got together for months to develop this recipe, deciding exactly what they were going for and kind of culling from the many, many pizza recipes on their site to make exactly this version. They made this one as kind of a hybrid of a bunch of different styles of pizza. So it's a little bit like a focaccia, so it's kind of fluffy. It's got the crispy edges of a pan pizza or like a deep dish style pizza. And it has sort of like a nice saucy, cheesy top that doesn't interfere with the fluffiness. And there are a few genius tricks that I'll tell you about to get exactly that. All right, time for our next fold. It's already getting so much more relaxed and resisting me pulling it. It's very satisfying. It's submitting to my will. I forgot to set a timer for that last one, but I think it's been 5 minutes. And that's okay. It's flexible. It's somewhat indestructible, Posey told me. The dough is definitely even more relaxed. So I believe in those 5-minute intervals, the dough is just getting a chance to hydrate the flour more and to let the gluten relax. This is one of those things that anytime you're dealing with dough and it's just resisting you and you're trying to, roll out something or form it into a shape and it just keeps springing back into place, give it a little rest and it will relax and the gluten will behave. There's another point in this recipe where that happens. You're trying to push it into the pan, and if it springs back, just give it a little break. I feel like that is a good metaphor for how we should all be handling stress in general. Take a 5-minute breather and fold again. This folding technique is not specific to this recipe. This can be your starter recipe, but all kinds of bread recipes can come from this one technique. In fact, there's already a genius recipe on Food 52 from Jessica Fefter that is a 5-fold challah. No kneading, just folding. Speaking of, I think it's time for our last fold. So look how much more glossy that is already. There are no dry shaggy bits. It looks just like the pizza dough that you could buy at a pizza place or at the grocery store. Folding is all done. Now it's gonna sit out for about 40 minutes to just get started on its fermentation, but then you stick it in the fridge for anywhere from 12 to 72 hours. It's incredibly flexible, and that long cold rise in the fridge is going to develop a ton of flavor. It's not going to balloon up in the fridge. That will happen later when we take it out at room temp. But we have a swap because we need to do this all in one nap time. Don't look in the fridge. Okay. So here's my swap. This has been hanging out in my fridge overnight. And now I'm gonna just show you how to shape it. You'll notice that this pan is not the pan that we are going to end in. It's because I only have one skillet that's the right size. But the great thing about this recipe is that you can use kind of any baking pan that's around that size. Posey has told me that this recipe is basically indestructible. So there are instructions for what size cake pan, square or round. You could even use like a 9x13 pan, Posey says. But whatever you're using, you need to add more olive oil because that's gonna give it this like crispy bottom and side crust that we are looking for. So that just needs to coat the whole bottom and up the sides. You can use a paper towel or I just use my fingers. It's gonna help everything get crispy from the bottom all the way up the sides. And then just plop your dough right in there. This is one of the fun parts. One of the many fun parts when handling dough. You're going to dimple it. So you're going to just stick your fingers in it like this, and that is helping both press the dough out gently to the edges. As you can see, mine is making this funny shape. I think that's fine. We're just gonna kind of like glue it back together. You are pressing the dough out to the edges gently without knocking out all these beautiful bubbles that you've been making in your long cold rise overnight. And this also is making sort of little cups for the toppings to sit in so that the dough can rise around it, as opposed to like a flat surface where the toppings might kind of weigh it down and prevent it from rising up. So this is one of those moments where your gluten might be a little bit tight and resisting you a little bit. So you give it a 15-minute break if it's doing that, and just come back and finish pressing it out to the edges. Cover it again so it doesn't dry out. This pizza dough, even though I'm just showing you the totally basic version with cheese and tomato sauce, is amenable to whatever toppings you want to put on, whatever you have in your fridge. King Arthur has suggested things like pesto, a white pie. They've done wackier things like a chili cheese fries version, and things like fennel and radicchio and other seasonal produce. But I would love to know what you would put on this, especially right now. What's in your fridge? So that's had a little break, and now it is being much better behaved, smushing into its pan. And you'll see momentarily what it looks like when it's had a chance to rise for a couple hours after this in a different pan. Surprise! It's in all the edges. And then that just needs to rise for about 2 hours at room temp before it gets topped and baked. This is the dough that I made last night, took out a few hours ago, dimpled, and then let rise in the pan, and you can see it's got a nice jiggle to it. So it is risen, and now it just needs to get its cheese and sauce and go into the oven. Most of the cheese goes all over this crust, all the way to the edges. This is key in King Arthur's plans for this recipe. They wanted cheese to go to every edge before the sauce went on to protect the dough from getting too soggy. It also melts at these edges and makes this amazing crispy cheese layer on every piece. Okay, that's pretty even. You're using about 3/4 of the cheese for the first layer. Then you dollop your tomato or pizza sauce. I'm just using something called pizza sauce straight out of the jar. Make sure the tomato sauce is something you like the taste of, because its flavor needs to go far here, because you're only doing a little bit. It looks like it's not enough, but it will be. And you're not gonna spread it out, which feels wrong, but you want all of that cheese to have a chance to melt and crisp up. There. And then the rest of the cheese just covers up your dollops. And this is pretty amenable to whatever toppings you want, but this version without any toppings at all really is just perfect. Look at all that cheese. Okay, that's it. So this goes straight into the oven, 450, bottom rack. 18 to 20 minutes. You want your racks on the bottom and on the top. If you're looking at it and it seems like the bottom crust is done and crispy, but you want the top to be more bubbly, then you'll just move it up to the top rack. That's it. Now wait for pizza. I got caught. Wow, this looks really good. You can see there's where the little sauce pockets are gonna be. This is where the like focaccia-y pizza dough has puffed up with its extra crispy cheese on top and then on the sides too. I'm sensing some sticky spots. So just to be safe, I'm taking my thin fish spatula, making sure it's freed. Okay, that's gonna come out. There. So you want to get it out as soon as you feel comfortable doing so, because the longer it sits in the pan, the more it might start to steam and make that bottom crust a little bit soggier. But this feels very crispy still. And then as soon as you feel like you can eat it without burning your mouth, kitchen shears or some other kind of clean household scissors are the perfect thing to slice this so that you don't crush it along the way. I'm gonna give it a couple minutes to cool though. So I got my kitchen shears. This is such a fun way to cut this pizza. And And it's totally working. The dough is still staying super fluffy. Ooh, look at that. Wow. So you can see all this gorgeous crumb inside, but then on this side, there's all this saucy, molten, like pizza-y stuff going on. And then, oh, here's maybe the best part, that crispy edge. And then the bottom also has some nice browning and crispiness to it. It's perfect. I'm gonna try not to burn myself. Wow. It's really so good. And you guys are gonna love it. And it is so simple, and it's going to fit so perfectly into your life right now while you're at home. Each step only takes about 10 seconds, maybe a minute. They're just spaced out over the course of a day. So just set your timers. If you miss one, it's not a big deal. It'll be fine. And then you'll get this at the end. I'll see you next week. If you'd like to make this recipe, it is linked down below. And I hope that you enjoy it. Tell us what you do with it, what toppings you put on it. Let us know what questions you have. And if you want more recipes like this every single week, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And I will see you back here in my apartment next week. See you soon.